Hi everybody, welcome back to Bentley House. I'm Aira, and today I have a really special video for you guys, or at least it's a really special video for me. I am honored today to be a guest artist for the YTAC, or the YouTube Artists Collective. This is a group of artists here on YouTube that get together once every 3 months, I think it is, and they make a piece of artwork based around one theme. I have been a fan of this group of artists for, well, since I started my channel, and I'll even link a video in the description box below that's from over 2 years ago when my channel was mostly about art and not a lot about miniatures, where I unofficially participated, and you can see that I'm even talking about my art journey, and that is right before I switched to doing mostly miniatures on my channel. I've been fans of artists like Bailey J and Valerie from Art a la Carte since I started, so the chance to create art alongside them as an official guest artist is a dream come true for me and my channel. All the artists that have participated this round, I will have links to their channels in the description box below. Please make sure to go check out every single one. The theme for this round is mythical characters. And at one point I think someone even wrote mythical creatures, and I think it was the mythical creatures part that really got me thinking, and so my piece is based around gargoyles. I am extremely honored to be the first 3D artist to participate, and because I am the first 3D artist and a lot of these ladies work in 2D, I wanted to do something similar but still staying in 3D. So I got a shadow box, and I am putting my artwork inside the shadow box so I can still hang it up, and it can from a distance still kind of reflect a piece of artwork that might even be interpreted as 2D from a certain distance. If you're new to my channel, I mostly do miniatures, dollhouses, etc. I do a lot of tutorials if you're interested in that. This won't be as detailed of a tutorial because I had to do a lot of different things to complete this project, and this video is already super long. But if there's anything in particular you want to see more detail on how I do, please leave that in the comments. Thank you again to the YTAC for allowing me to participate. Let's get started. After I decided that I wanted my main mythical creatures to be gargoyles, I wanted to put them into an abandoned building type scene. And if you know me at all, you know that abandoned is kind of my style. And so I wanted to come up with some really cool architecture to be the background for this piece. So I sketched out my idea, and if you know anything about the mythology behind gargoyles, you know that they are protectors of the building and protectors of the people inside the building. And along that thought line, I wanted to explore the idea of what gargoyles might be up to if their building became abandoned. So there were no people inside and the building was just left to deteriorate. I picture this building that I'm starting to create now to be an old apartment building in like a downtown metropolitan area that's just been left, and the gargoyles are so bored that they've started playing cards and they've collected snacks, and they're just kind of passing the time on the side of the building that they were built into. So what I'm doing now, I've taken the back part of my shadow box and I've translated the background onto a sheet of paper that I know will fit into my shadow box. And now I want to put that into foam board. That is going to be my main material for creating the building. I'm now going to use my measured out drawing as a guide, a cutting template with my X-Acto. And what I'm cutting out right now is going to be the windows. I want this scene to literally just look like a chunk of building taken out of time and put into like a square box, if that makes sense. So I'm going to have a rounded top of a window at the bottom of the scene and a squared off part of a window that will be like a window ledge at the top of the scene. So now you can see I'm adding on where the columns will go. Obviously, because I'm making this in 3D, I'm going to have to build those columns up off of the flat surface of the foam board. Right now I'm lightly drawing in my lines that's going to be my brick pattern, and it's rather large brick, so maybe it's not even technically brick, but like a CMU or a stone. And I'm going to be using my brick tutorial that I made for my abandoned coffee shop. I will put the link in the description box below and a link in the iCard if you want to check that out in more detail. Basically what I do is I cut very shallowly into the foam board, and then I use an even more dull instrument to make a dent in the foam board to create the grout lines that go in between the brick or stonework. And I do this very carefully, and here you can see the shadows, how it's creating that very subtle grout line. After I've done all the brickwork, I am going to go back and start putting in some cracks, and this is what's going to give the character to the wall to really show that this is an abandoned old building that's really starting to fall apart. I'm going to pull the foam out very gently. This is just one layer of foam, so I want to make sure and be as careful as possible. I'm starting out painting the brick this orange color because I've decided I want the gargoyles to be gray and I need them to pop out from the background, and so I don't want everything to be gray. So I'm just experimenting with this orange. I kind of dull it down a little bit later. So I've cut out several strips of foam board, and now I'm slowly gluing them on, trying to build up those columns that I have in my drawing. And I'm also having to go back and forth and check this with my shadow box to make sure that everything fits and that I'm not getting too far out from my back surface so that it doesn't like hit the glass. Also, to keep with the abandoned theme, I want to make sure that any of my crisp edges are kind of cut down and beveled, because if there were columns on the side of the building and the building was crumbling, those edges would definitely not be sharp and crisp like a brand new building. There would have been some bits of the stone getting chipped away, especially if these were gargoyles that were alive and moving around. They probably would have been bumping into the architecture. So now I'm building some cap pieces for the bases where the gargoyles are going to sit, and I decided just to do 2 layers. Even though I had 3 in my drawing, I felt like the 2 layers on the top and the bottom of the architecture there looked a little bit better, and it left more room for my gargoyles. I also decided to put a back piece in there so it looked as though the outside column on the building extended, because when you see a gargoyle, usually it has kind of a spot on the side of the building and it's all kind of hunched in there. It's kind of part of a column, so I wanted to make sure and make it look like this was specifically the spot for the gargoyle, and the gargoyle will be the same exact color and texture as the columns. What I'm doing right now is I use my same pattern to create another archway, and this is going to be an archway that becomes the stone arch that goes on top of the bottom window. And I'm just going to cut it out of foam board. I'm going to use the same exact technique that I used for the brickwork on the wall to cut in grout lines, and it has like that keystone look there at the top. It gives it a little bit more of an architectural interest. And now I'm just building in the windowsill, and that's going to be important because that's where I'm putting some of the little snacks and things that the gargoyles will be just have collected and will be kind of, I feel like they're kind of nesting up there a little bit. So here is the basic architecture of the building, and one thing I want to make sure and do before I paint is I want to cover each exposed foam edge with a layer of wood filler. If you paint the foam edge, you will get some like little, it will look like foam. It'll have like a spongy texture to it, and I do not want that at all. I want to make sure that it looks like stone, and so I'm taking my wood filler, and anywhere I see exposed foam board edge, I'm going to cover that with a flat layer of the wood filler. It's also really easy to sand, and it's just a really good material to have around when you're working in miniature. So now I have these decorative pieces that I've drawn in. I really didn't know how to create them, but I decided to go ahead and try to make them out of polymer clay. And I wanted something non-specific, like I don't have a specific place that this is taking place. And the little decoration that I came up with actually kind of looks like an octopus or a squid type creature. I was just playing around and having fun with polymer clay, just trying to come up with something decorative that you might see on the side of a building and trying to not make it location specific. All I did for this is I used several different clay cutters that I had and just made shapes that I really liked, made it kind of a shield shape in the background, and then I took long snakes of clay and just curled them up to make kind of this weird squid design, I guess. So once I liked how it looked and I thought it looked nice on the column, I wanted to make life a little bit easier for myself, and so I'm going to make a mold of this piece by using my amazing mold putty. And all you do is you mix them half and half to make a mold, and then you can just create as many as you want and it will look exactly like your original as long as you make the mold as best as you can. So it takes about 15 minutes for it to dry. I usually like to let it sit for at least 30 to make sure, and then you can pull your original out. And the reason it kind of looks weird is I'm just using my scrap clay that I have left over. This is clay that I used for something else because I am going to paint the whole thing, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to use scrap clay to make all of my pieces, and I need about 5 of these, one for each column and then one that goes below the window. After those are all attached, I'm going to go ahead and paint over them with a little bit of white. This isn't going to be the final color of the column, but I want to make sure that I'm blocking out the color from the scrap clay as best as I can. So here is the final architectural piece, and now it is time to add some texture. And my original idea was to add some cinnamon into some gray paint with a little bit of glue, so I knew that it would stick to the column, and this was a horrible idea. It did not turn out well. It made a very sticky, gross, kind of slime type texture, and it did not go on the building very well. Why I continued on with it, I do not know. That was probably not the smartest idea. But when I get to texturing the gargoyles, I had a much better idea from a friend, and I will show that to you when we get there. But I ended up doing another layer of gray, and I do like the texture in the end, but I do not suggest cinnamon in your paint for texturing. Now I'm taking some white, adding a little bit of orange and a little bit of gray to create this color to go over the brick. I did think the orange was a little bit too unrealistic when it comes to stone colors, so if this was a stone building, I think it would have been a little bit more on the muted side. Now that that's finished, I want to go ahead and start aging my piece. And to bring out the grout lines, I'm going to take some watered down black paint, and I have it on a paintbrush, and I'm just delicately touching those grout lines, and that water in the paint will just make it spread along the lines. It's really fun. It takes a lot of patience and an extra paper towel on the side to make sure you can blot up any accidents or any mistakes, but it's really fun to go ahead and just bring out those grout lines, especially on an abandoned building. So now I'm taking a little, like a very light little bit of the gray paint, and I'm painting a few of the stones here and there to give more interest in the stone. I'm also going to take a little bit of the gray, orange, and white mixture and highlight the columns. This is helping bring the colors of the stone wall and the gray columns, and they're kind of melding together because I'm using some of the paint that's on the wall onto the columns and some of the paint that's on the columns onto the wall. So I'm just trying to bring this background piece together. So here you can see dry brushing which is a really fun technique. It means that you have a little bit of paint on your brush, but it's mostly wiped off. And in the corners, I want to make sure and build up that dirt and grime and really look like it's just been sitting there for years without anyone caring for it. Dry brushing has to be one of my favorite antiquing or aging techniques. I pretty much dry brush everything. So now I'm going to work on the windows. I need to get a glass texture in there. This is some leftover packaging from when I did my Nightmare Before Christmas scene. And I'm going to use that packaging, which is really strong. Like, definitely look at your packaging that things come in, because they can definitely be useful for miniatures. I'm going to trace out the window that I need and cut it so that it overlaps a little bit on the back, because I do want to glue it down. Now I'm using my X-Acto knife to make what looks like a crack in the window. You can't have an abandoned building without a cracked window, obviously. So I did make that little space at the bottom so that I could cut that piece out, so it did look like there was actually a hole in the glass. And this is what it looks like once it's up against the back of the piece. Now I'm going to be using my glue gun, and there are probably other glues that you could use, but I wanted to go ahead and glue this in quickly, and I'm just tacking it into place on both sides to make sure it's lined up correctly before I do the rest of the side. And I left the bottom window intact, so I just have a crack in the top window. This is my billion-year-old bottle of gallery glass. You can find this if you have like a Hobby Lobby. They have like a glass craft section, and it makes really good what would you call it? I guess leading, because that's what it's called, but it helps connect the window frame to the window itself, and it gives it that cohesive look. So I've added 3 pieces of foam board to each side behind the columns, and this is because I'm making a space for these drapes to go inside the windows. I'm not making an entire interior scene inside of the apartment building, and so I need to create room for these drapes because I do want there to be look realistic, so I need to have drapes in there so I don't have to make an interior scene. I went ahead and aged these fabrics, and then I do have a drape making tutorial which I will put in the iCard if you're interested in seeing how I make drapes. I did kind of a flowered one towards the top and then a brown patterned material towards the bottom. And I added a line of hot glue just because there's no support at the top. I wanted this to be the support to make sure that those drape wrinkles stay in the fabric. So now I'm just using some watered down paint to make the windows look smudged and old. So here's our completed background for this piece, a very old abandoned apartment building that's ready for its gargoyles. So these guys are in an interesting, playful pose. Well, at least one of them is, who looks like he's winning. So I need to make their armature. I'm going to be using some wire, some masking tape, and some aluminum foil to start building up their bodies and to start getting an idea for how I want them to sit in the background. I am not the greatest when it comes to sculpting people, figures, and I'm especially still learning with polymer clay. So this was a little bit of a daunting task for me, but my one saving grace is that gargoyles come in all different shapes and sizes and usually have very interesting kind of funny faces anyway. So I really tried not to worry too much about it. I actually did a lot of research on different gargoyles. I mean, there's just millions, seems like, of different types of gargoyles. There's even modern types, but of course, when you think of gargoyles, you think of Notre Dame, and it was the day after I finished this project that there was the tragedy, the massive fire at Notre Dame. So my heart goes out to France, and definitely keeping the firefighter that was harmed in my prayers, but I know that they will rebuild their national treasure. It was just a joy to research that building, and I was just heartbroken to hear what was happening. So basically what I'm doing to create these gargoyles is I'm using the armature and then I'm wrapping the entire thing with clay. Again, this is my scrap clay, but I ended up mushing it all together to try and create one color because I felt like trying to sculpt with multiple colors would kind of be a little bit confusing on what exactly I was doing. And it's really nice that I don't have to be make it like super smooth like a human being, because these are supposed to be creatures made out of stone. Possibly there were bits chipped away. It was probably carved by someone by hand, so they didn't have to be super smooth and super exact. But I did use some rubbing alcohol to smooth the surface of the polymer clay as I went along. I first made the body and then I baked the body so that I knew that it would stay in the sitting position that I wanted for my piece. Then I created the feet. I decided to give them more of like a bird type feet. One, because it was easy to create, and two, because I felt like their bodies were looking a little bit human, so I wanted to make sure and give them those otherworldly, mythical proportions and features. So this piece of clay is a little bit different than the others because I ran out of clay as I was creating both gargoyles, and so that's why their heads are kind of silvery, because that's the type of clay that I had. But once I had the feet and hands baked, I felt good enough to go on to the head. Now, a lot of the gargoyles that I researched don't have necks, and so I wasn't super concerned about making an actual neck, and I just kind of like gave them like a round head sitting on top of broad shoulders type of look. And then I just kept adding shapes to the face, and this was the gargoyle I was kind of going off of because I kind of liked the shape of his face. I know he's not actually on a building, he's more like a lawn ornament, but I really liked the shape of his face, and it felt very typical gargoyle to me, with the little pointed ears and the two front horns. So on the gargoyle designs themselves, I have one happy gargoyle and one concerned, kind of sad gargoyle. So as you can see, I had that baking soda and paint on the screen for a second. That was an idea from my friend Katie Reed, who's an amazing artist herself, and it really gave this cool stone texture, and that's what I should have done in the first place and not done the cinnamon. But it worked really well, but I did feel like I needed to seal it with a matte finish because it felt very powdery, like it was going to come off. And so I ended up covering the gargoyles with that powder mixture with paint so that I had a stone type texture. So now I'm going to age the gargoyles, and I am using this like pointed brush. I feel like I can get into corners with it. And I'm adding some darker paint to the back of the column area, and that's going to help the gargoyles that are in front kind of stand out. Any place there would be a shadow, I'm adding a little bit of watered down black paint. I have all the paints on the left there that I'm using. Of course, I'm using the black and brown for the aging and dirtying, the white to make some highlights on places where I want to be a little bit brighter. The orange I am mixing with a little bit of white to kind of bring in the background color of the brick, and then I'm using the green to kind of make a mossy lichen type look, as if something's been growing on the stone, growing on the columns, and then also growing on the gargoyles. Now, because I'm having these gargoyles play cards, I needed to print off some cards, and I used a little bit of watercolor paint to make the back of it red so that it looks like a typical playing card, and then I just carefully cut them all out. I glued them together to make a nice hand of cards and also aged them a little bit. I put that into the sad gargoyle's hand, and then I made another hand of cards for the happy gargoyle, and he actually also has 2 extra cards that the sad gargoyle cannot see because he is obviously cheating, and I have no idea what game they are playing, but they only one is having fun. I also wanted to add a bird nest, and I do have a tutorial on how to make a bird nest and how to age it into your project so it looks natural. And of course, if you're adding a bird nest, you must add the bird Pooh to add to the realism. And of course, he's on the sad gargoyles side. Lastly, I'm adding in my miniatures. I have a little Chinese takeout box, a Coke bottle, a soda can, and the rest of the cards are up there on the windowsill. And then I also add a little newspaper behind the happy guy. And then I wanted to take some white acrylic paint and add some tick marks on the wall, as if these gargoyles are so bored they're keeping track of how many times they have won, and my poor sad gargoyle has only won twice. So here is the final design. This is my piece for mythical creatures or mythical characters. My little gargoyles sitting on the side of the building, so bored, and just trying to entertain themselves, pass the time. I really enjoyed this. I had so much fun trying to fit this scene into a shadow box. I think I'll do that even more with when you have doll houses and miniature scenes and room boxes, you can lose a lot of space. So having something that I can actually hang up on the wall and walk by and enjoy is really, really fun for me. Thank you again so much to the YTAC for allowing me to participate, allowing me to be the first 3D artist that's participated in a theme. I hope you guys will check out all the videos in the description box below. These artists are so amazing. They've been so inspiring to me. I hope they will be inspiring to you guys as well. If you want to participate unofficially, you're welcome to do that anytime. Also, their Facebook page is linked below so that you can kind of see what themes are coming up and when they will be posting videos. Thank you so much for watching my video, for being here. If you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!